Imagine a world where your written words have the power to shape reality, where darkness lurks and every corner hides a mysterious secret. Welcome to Alan Wake, a series that has a dedicated fanbase that loves all things Remedy, and if you're already one of them, I'm pretty confident you'll love this entry too. The first game is adored by many, but personally, I thought it was poorly executed overall. It had an intriguing story, but the gameplay and performances were sorely lacking, and were both very clunky. Perhaps if I had played it closer to around the time when it came out, I might have enjoyed it more. But when I finally got around to it, it felt really outdated. The cracks showed, and it didn't age very well. With that said, Alan Wake 2 is a far cry from the first installment, and shows the growth of the studio over time. From Quantum Break to Control, and now Alan Wake 2, Remedy has come a long way and have learnt a lot since the first one, most particularly the gameplay and the mechanics. This rings true so much so that even if the story isn't your cup of tea, at least the gameplay likely will be, but we'll get more into that in just a moment. Let's discuss the story first, in case you aren't familiar with the basic premise to begin with, considering 70% of you who voted on this poll have not started with the first one, so you may lack context as to what you'll be getting into. And although Sam Lake himself, the creative director of Remedy Entertainment, said doing your homework isn't required to understand Alan Wake 2, I would say at the very least watch a recap, because I'd imagine going in blind might give you a bit of a whiplash. No, seriously. This game is a real trip from start to finish, and that is something that you need to consider as well. If you're looking for a story that makes logical sense, you probably should look elsewhere, because a fundamental thing you need to understand about this game is that it's more metaphorical than it is logical, and things can seem even more strange if you aren't used to the blend of the live action elements as well. But now with that out of the way, here is the basic setup. The story follows Alan Wake, a writer who goes on vacation with his wife Alice to a small town called Bright Falls. There, he expects to finally clear his head of a writer's block when Alice suddenly goes missing, and that is when things turn weird and supernatural, and everything turns for the worst when he discovers his works of fiction are now becoming a reality in the form of weird shadowy people. So picture Twin Peaks, which is what this and tons of other media were inspired from, like Wayward Pines and Life is Strange, meets Inkheart, I guess? I feel like some of these are kinda niche things, but that is the best way I can describe it. Now to provide a plot summary for this game, but quick spoiler warning if you are interested in playing the first one. FBI agent Saga Anderson and her partner Alex Casey make their way to Bright Falls to investigate a series of recent murders. There, they find that these murders may be related to a cult known as the Cult of the Tree. Meanwhile, even after 13 years, Alan finds himself still trapped in the dark place. Yeah. Thanks, Phil Collins. And before we turn over to the actual gameplay side of things, a minor critique I'd like to make is in how the voice of certain characters are a little out of sync. And that's because characters like Alex Casey and Alan Wake himself are voiced by different people to the ones whose likeness are being used while also doing the performance capture. So like Alex Casey is pretty much Max Payne because he is voiced by the same voice actor as Max Payne, but also shares a face with Sam Lake. In case you haven't figured it out yet, Alan Wake is a horror game, but it's also so much more than that. But as far as the scariness factor goes, if you're curious, it's probably somewhere on the spectrum from Resident Evil Village to Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. I don't know exactly where that would fit, but it's somewhere there. But don't worry, it's mostly only during Alan sections of the game. And to be fair, I think most of the fear will come from all the cheap jump scares, and there are a ton of them. It also, gameplay-wise, definitely took inspiration from not only Remedy's previous games, but also the Resident Evil remakes. You'll find that this game will rhyme with Resident Evil 4 Remake, especially in a lot of ways, to the point where I've seen people call it a direct copy-paste. But honestly, this game offers a lot of other elements that still make it feel uniquely Remedy. However, there definitely are things that are similar. The setting with the woods, the over-shoulder camera style, and the movement, and it being about a cult of all things. And of course, you're not fighting zombies, but you are fighting dark creatures that kinda might as well be. But more specifically, the inventory management down to the weapon slots and the various collectibles and puzzles are all very much like Resident Evil. Where it differs in the combat is the flashlight mechanic that of course is one of the central elements that make Alan Wake, Alan Wake. In the first one, you needed to direct your light for a certain number of seconds before you use that portion of the battery meter, but here it is as instantaneous as pressing a button, using it when you feel you need it. That change alone drastically overhauls the combat, but the combat is also just so much smoother and well balanced too. It doesn't overwhelm you, and there aren't tons of pointless encounters. It's much more sparse, giving you a greater sense of tension rather than the excessive tedium that was packaged within the first one. The game is split up episodically, and you can switch between Saga and Alan's stories mostly whenever you want, unraveling their stories at your own pace. I would recommend hopping back and forth between the two after most chapters end, just to break up the potential monotony from either side. You'll also likely find it's a much more effective way of storytelling, as you feel like you're slowly piecing together both stories and slowly unraveling how their lives are intertwined. It's like a giant puzzle. Speaking of, the puzzles in this game are probably one of the best parts about it. While it isn't an open world game, it still offers tons of exploration and some clever puzzles sprinkled in, which helps it feel much more massive. And each location feels real and lived in, especially Bright Falls. They aren't super difficult either, just enough of a brain teaser that feels satisfying enough, like answers to the combination locks you'll find attached to cult stashes. Cult stashes give you extra supplies to collect when you're running low. And while you're out there exploring, you'll also come across some doll puzzles that grant you some charms that buff you a little, and some lunchboxes that contain manuscript fragments that you can use to upgrade your weapons.
A lunchbox? Lunch.
The puzzles don't end here though. There are various types baked into the gameplay. The especially interesting ones I found to be in what Saga calls her mind place, a representation of her mind that helps her solve cases that you can open up at any time. Almost like Sherlock Holmes and his mind palace, which, by the way, I think Frogware should take notes on for their next Sherlock game. In her mind palace, you can look at her case board, which allows you to connect and make deductions based on the clues you find while you investigate. It helps both you and Saga look at the bigger picture. Though, don't be fooled, this isn't really a full detective game like the Sherlock ones, so the case board here sort of forces you to place the right clue in the right spot, but it's kind of just a cool way of interacting nonetheless. In the Mind Palace, Saga can also profile certain people and learn exactly what it is that they are truly thinking or feeling, which can open up more dialogue. None of these elements, including the dialogue, affect anything. It's more just telling this linear story in different interactive ways. Aside from these two tabs, you can also view manuscript pages that you pick up along the way, as well as videos and songs. So essentially, this whole place is really more like an intricate pause menu, except there already is a pause menu and this doesn't pause, but you get what I mean. Alan also has a similar internal dimension as well when you play his sections, called the Writer's Room. It gives you the ability to view tapes and listen to those audio clips, albeit different ones, and it also has its own weapon upgrade system, called Words of Power, that allow you to upgrade one thing at a time, depending on which word you just picked up. The Writer's Room operates somewhat differently to the Mind Place though, because instead of viewing case files and trying to solve them with clues, Alan has a plot board that he uses to change events and help navigate each level. Watch this. You see that? Just by changing a certain plot element and rewriting, it can change the entire room or area that you're in just like that. Similarly, in addition to his flashlight, Alan gets an angel lamp, which allows you to change that area by stealing or adding light to that nearby source. Kinda like Dumbledore's Deluminator in Harry Potter. In fact, both of these mechanics that can switch the world in almost an instantaneous manner are similar to what we've seen in Hogwarts Legacy earlier this year and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart in 2021. Yeah, I know, all these mechanics can seem a little overwhelming, but you'll get used to it. There were a few moments here and there earlier on where I would forget these mechanics even existed and would be lost trying to figure out a puzzle until things would just click. The graphics and lighting and the way the game looks is just incredible. The character models are pretty good too, but the most impressive aspects are the environments. The way the streets look in New York or the way that the sunlight reflects against the beach, it all looks pretty damn stunning. And the attention to detail is quite insane. Like, even when I'm not directly interacting with objects, you can clearly see there's text still, and it doesn't just blur itself out or become some sort of scribbled mess. Sorry, Mr. Scratch. And regardless if you play on fidelity or performance, you'll still be able to appreciate the little details like this as you traverse and explore its world and its incredible level design. One point I will take off from it though, is that even with it being a linear and often controlled environment, each map location you visit is a little too large, which can have some downsides. You got Bright Falls, Cauldron Lake, and the Watery. Bright Falls in particular is not the best to navigate if you leave a particular area and you want to explore further later on, because the distance can be sometimes quite far. And I understand why there's no fast traveling in that region, since they want you to feel that potential danger that may be lurking, but I think figuring out something else would have made the process of backtracking a little less grueling. I would suggest adding fast travel points you can unlock in those break rooms, which are like the safe rooms in Resident Evil, and only use once you're in one of those. But if they don't want to include fast travel at all, there should be another way to make your character move a little bit faster than continuously holding down the left stick to sprint. So note to completionists, try to do everything in that area first if you can, because backtracking just isn't much fun. Aside from this though, I feel like this is the only real note of criticism. Everything else works smoothly, and the map doesn't hold your hand either, and that's a good thing, because it allows you to study the map, and looking at your goals will usually be enough to set you on your path to figure out where you're going, instead of relying on an objective mark, incentivizing more exploration. I've had no bugs at all. The only quote-unquote issues were the few times objects like cardboard boxes would randomly get knocked over, or when Alan's hands would get clipped through a table in one scene. But that's it. I can't recall anything else. I found it important to mention, considering I had heard someone say that there were bugs, but played it prior to launch, and I think this is one of the few times where a day 1 patch actually did its job. But, as usual, the Digital Foundry will be linked below. To surmise, Alan Wake 2 represents a significant leap forward from its predecessor, showcasing the growth and evolution of Remedy as a studio. It feels like the culmination of years of work and effort within each title they released. While the first game had an intriguing story but lacked in gameplay and performances, Alan Wake 2 rectifies many of those issues. The game doesn't just offer a horror experience, it delves into the metaphysical and the metaphorical, making it a surreal, unique, and memorable adventure. And while the story may not always make logical sense, it is an engaging, mind-bending journey that keeps you at the edge of your seat. And if any of this intrigues you, it's time to dive into the darkness and embrace the light. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, please drop a like, and check out this playlist here for more reviews. And until next time, I'll see you soon.